Hey y'all, my name is Shonté, and so for today's episode of The Conversation, we're talking about marriage. All right, so we're gonna have a marriage panel that's gonna include two couples who are here to share some nuggets about how to have a successful marriage. Before we get into that, please go ahead, if you have not already, hit the subscribe button and also the notification button so you can stay up to date with my latest videos posted on this YouTube site. So stay tuned. Joining me for the conversation, we're going to be talking about marriage, all things marriage, are two special couples. First, we have Mr. and Mrs. Chuck Williamson. So we have Chuck and Beth Williamson, and we have James and Elayne Hart. So thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. So just starting off, just tell us a little bit about how you guys met and how long you've been married.
So I actually met my husband while I was in college. I went to North Carolina State University, and he was a student at St. Augustine University. And so at that particular time, I was active in a sorority, and we were planning for a step show. So he was in another fraternity, and so they came over to State to teach us a step for the step show. And that's how I met him the first time. And one of my girlfriends was from his hometown of Greensboro, and I asked her to hook me up. And,
Nice.
and so he called, and it was a little shaky in the beginning. I almost lost him from the very beginning. I kind of messed up. Even the first date, I messed up really bad, but he gave me a second chance, thank God. And we've been together ever since.
Okay.
We've been married for 30 years.
30 years. Okay, nice. All right, Elayne and James, how about y'all?
Okay.
So we had a similar story in that we both met at UNC Greensboro when we were in undergraduate. And we had been friends for a while, probably since the start of our sophomore year.
Yeah.
And we pretty much remained friends until we graduated, but probably right before we walked across the stage, I decided to take it a little further and ask her to be my girlfriend full time. So that's kind of how we met. And we have been married for it'll be 5 years in April.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, nice. All right, so my first question for you all is gonna be, how important is compromise in marriage? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I would say, it's very important. Sometimes we look at compromise the wrong way. I think, early in my marriage when I was young, you kind of want to win every battle and have it your way. And so one of the things that I really value is a peaceful home, right? And so there are a lot of times I think compromise kind of molds into servanthood. So there are a lot of times I find myself serving my wife, right? Just because I think that's what a good spouse or a good husband does. So I think in all things, compromise is a must. When you have that critical conversation, when you have big issues you need to deal with, I just don't believe in giving up any ground in my marriage just to win a battle. So I think compromise is important.
That's good. Yeah, I would say I agree. Definitely. I think for us, compromise is equally as important. And it's one of those things that you start realizing, hopefully early on in your marriage, that y'all are not on opposing sides or teams. Like, we are one. And so it's not about, like you said, the battle or winning whoever is right in the situation, but what can we do to make sure that we both win together? And so that's going to be give and take on both sides. So I'm not always the one to compromise, nor is he, but it's a balance between whatever's going to get us to the best result.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. Okay. So moving on to the questions that I got on social. So like I was saying earlier, I actually post on my social media pages and just kind of across a few platforms, some questions that people really want to know when it comes to marriage. So these aren't questions I made up. This is what the people want to know. Okay. All right. So the first question is, did you know when you first met that you two would get married? And how long after you met did you know?
Okay. And I can answer that. I would tell you absolutely not.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be honest with y'all. When I met my husband, I was in one of those seasons where I felt like I was playing the field. That was where I was. Like, I'm being honest. Like, I had been in a relationship 6 months prior to meeting him for 3 years. And so I was like, I'm just not committing to anybody. That's not what I want right now. That's not what I'm looking for. And so I had no intentions. That wasn't on my mind. But like I said, once we got together and as we went out on a date and we just got to a point where we were inseparable. You know, I just did not want to be away from him. I just love being with him. And I think we met in September, and I think by December is when we made that commitment that, you know what, this is it. And that's where it happened. We didn't get married though for 3 years later because, you know, I was in college and my dad told me, said, if you get married now, you know, he gets the college tuition too. So I figured, I figured I better graduate first.
Right.
So I waited to graduation and we got married a year after I graduated.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, I would totally agree. That's pretty much our story too. I had no clue or no plan to marry her when I first met her. Like I said, we were just friends and she was actually in a relationship at the time. And, you know, when we meet in college, you 19, 20, you know, a lot of times, you know, you almost feel like you have to have everything figured out before you start talking about marriage, you know, trying to figure out what your purpose is, your vision. I didn't have none of that, but I did know as I was kind of progressing that there were certain qualities that she had that I knew would be valuable in any season that I would be in. And I started to appreciate those more as we became closer. And so I would say, I mean, we met maybe 2008. And so we didn't get engaged until 2015.
Yes, we dated about 5 years before we got married. And I mean, we talked about it a few years before then, but yeah, going into our relationship, that wasn't necessarily what crossed my mind either.
Yeah, we definitely grew up kind of together. And so we landed that marriage kind of down the road.
Okay. And so I hear these, what I like to call fairy tale type of things where people say, oh, you know, I just knew when I saw them. And you two said that that's not the case for y'all, but do you even think that's even realistic? Because, you know, we want to make sure we're teaching people as we're on this call, like that didn't work for you guys, but is that even a realistic thing to shoot for?
I think it happens for some people.
Mhm.
I think it has happened.
Well,
you know, I have an aunt that met her husband within a few weeks. They were married and they were married to death do their part. So I think, you know, we got to be open to the everybody's situation. Your situation may not be the same. I think it's the same as everybody doesn't have the same fingerprint. So every relationship may not come together the same way. And so we got to be open to the Spirit of God and how he leads and guides us.
Yeah.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? I don't think there's A plus B equals C. I think it's walking by faith and not by sight, and allowing the Holy Spirit to lead and guide you and trusting God with the situation.
Yeah.
That's good, Beth. How about you guys?
I agree. I think, same, that it's not a formula or a specific way that things go. Everybody can be different. And I do feel, you know, if you are meeting someone and you see somebody and you know at that moment, then let's hope that was the Holy Spirit giving you that guidance there, that this is the one. And I feel like oftentimes too, it comes through getting to know somebody and building that relationship there, and not necessarily what I see with my physical eyes as far as from that first sight. That may not be the final ending factor to seal the deal in a long-term commitment with somebody.
Yeah, I think that God can place a call on someone's life, but then there's ultimately the work that goes with that. And so I think that dating and marriage is the same way. You can meet someone and God can speak to you, but then at the same time, there are steps that confirm what he may have said to you. And so if you neglect those steps, then it may not necessarily be that what he said was wrong. It was just how he responded was incorrect. And so I think that that's something that has to be taken into account, especially as mentioned earlier, the way that dating and marriage goes. There is no kind of A plus B equals C or 1 + 1 = 2. There are a lot of different ways for God to accomplish the plan that he has. And so we have to be open to what that looks like. But we also have to take accountability for our roles in that and not just kind of leave it kind of to a miracle type of situation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to have a friendship first, and then at the same time, not being afraid to try. My thing is that, I always told my sons, I have 3 men, and my oldest son actually just got married in December. And I always told them, don't be afraid to enter into relationships with people. Don't be afraid to date. Don't be afraid to date, because you won't know until you around that individual, spend some time with that individual, if that individual is for you.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, don't be afraid of getting hurt, because the thing about Jesus shed blood on the cross to heal any wound.
Yeah.
And he will heal you. But there's a process to finding that person. You know what I'm saying? And so, don't be afraid to enter into new relationships, not, being wise at the same time, but you won't know if you don't spend some time around that person, if that person is for you.
Yeah, that's good. What was that, James?
I was just going to say that I think I probably, other than us being young at the time, what took us probably a while to get married was that I hadn't spent a lot of time dating myself. I didn't really know myself well enough to know what I needed. And so I think that when it comes to being intentional and being married, a lot of times where the issues come is that a person that doesn't really know themselves, or a lot of things that they could have spent time kind of examining further, kind of comes to a head when they get in a relationship. And so I think that shouldn't be neglected as well.
Yeah. And the best point that, there are some things too that you don't get to know when you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Some things don't come to the surface until you are with somebody else and they call you out, or they actually see behind whatever that is that you get to show the world. And so there are some things that, in a relationship, dating brings those things out and helps you to grow, hopefully.
Yeah, Elayne, that's an interesting point. And that leads me to a piggyback off of that question. Also addressing what James just said. So should you take time to get to know you and date you before you get married? And the reason why I say that is because, and I read a lot of blogs. I'm very, I try to keep my finger on the pulse of, how people think. And I read a lot about people are saying, well, I need to get my finances in order. I need to figure out what I want to do as a career first. And that has led millennials specifically to getting married later in life, and they're closer to their 30s or in their 30s, because they want to feel like they got themselves together before walking down the aisle. Versus my parents' generation, which my parents got married in 1988. So they're around Beth and Chuck's age generation. I know you guys got married earlier. You typically got married at a younger age. So what do you think that people need to take the time to date themselves, figure out exactly what they want in life? Or is it that marriage, we're maybe delaying unnecessarily? What are your thoughts on that?
But that's a really tough question. I think, for me, Beth talked about our start and having a little difficulty getting it kicked off. Her being in a relationship for a while, so she knew what she was like in a relationship. For me, I had, before us dating, I hadn't had a long-term relationship or even a really short term. I didn't do dating. And so I had always, based on my parents' model, there were some things that I had to have in a marriage. And I didn't know about myself, but I knew what I wanted in my wife. And so that's what when I met her, got to know her, saw those things. Um, I think when you say, should I wait to get myself together? After 30 years of marriage, as you evolve through different financial plateaus and children and investing, nothing's ever totally together. I don't think.
Agree.
At least not in
That's
my
good.
life. Maybe we're just jacked up, but um, I'm always striving for something new. And we had one child, then two, and then three, and then they went to school and they started doing activities, and then we wanted to invest it was always something that was having us prepare for the next level. And so that's my only concern when a person says, "Well, I want to wait till it's right, or till I get myself together." That could take a long time for you to even get that sense.
Mm.
Mhm.
And so what I've found in my marriage, my journey of getting right has been easier because of my marriage.
That's good.
Right? That's I don't think I would have accomplished the things I've accomplished without my wife. So I just believe that when you find the one and she meets that criteria or he meets that criteria, and it's good to go. God has sealed that thing in your heart. I think you go after it.
I think as a base,
Yeah.
any man getting ready to say I do, he got to have a job. You
Yeah,
know what I'm
that goes
saying?
without saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
female come
Yeah.
with a fee.
Yeah.
So I think those basic things do need to
That's right.
be. But what he said is so true. I think to me, it's not a matter when you find that one.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's basically, did you find that one when
Yeah.
you were 24?
Yeah.
Or did you find that one when you were 30, 32?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so, because you don't want to miss out on what God has for you.
Yeah.
You found the one, but you got to get all this stuff into place. Y'all could do that together.
Yeah.
The Bible said when you find a man that findeth a wife, find the good thing, attain a favor from the Lord. And so there is a favor. And then financially, it has been found that, financially is to your benefit when you're married. It's a whole lot easier to amass, especially when you don't, it's expensive to divorce, very expensive to divorce.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's economically sound too when you find that mate early
Yeah.
on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree with that. I think when I say, you were speaking specifically, Shonté, about millennials and kind of trying to figure out and wait, do I get myself to a certain point or get myself ready? And I agree. I don't think you're really ever ready because if you think you're ready, then you almost deny the fact that you don't need God because you don't know what the future holds. But I do think to your point, when you start talking about things like divorce, marriage is a covenant. And so I do think that there's a weight to that covenant. And so I think you do need to spend a little bit of time kind of gathering awareness about where you are and where your potential spouse may be so that when you enter into it, that it's something that's going to be at the forefront and be taken seriously because as we know, divorce just devastates the home. And so I do think it's not something that's supposed to be entered into lightly. But there is an awareness that you do need to have of the covenant and then of each person so that you can bring your best to it.
Yeah. And then to being open in that. So if you're open to growing, you're open to knowing that both of us are changing. Those are things that you don't have to say, I've met this mark, I've done this. You're open to growing and building those things together. And so I think, the mindset maybe of, let me go ahead and get all my ducks in a row before I get there. You find yourself the lonely duck at the end of it once everything is together and you're like, maybe
duck.
maybe I could have gotten to those things along the way. And like you said, so that you are understanding the weight of relationship, not entering to it lightly, but understanding that I can do those things and build those things up with someone else.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that's good, Elena. That's really good. Thank you for that. So the next question that came in is, married couples always say marriage takes work, but they don't explain that what that means. What work is involved in a healthy marriage?
I think basically when it comes to marriage, I guess when people say it takes work, because honestly, anytime you come together, when you come and you start living together with somebody, there's going to be things to happen and challenges. Y'all remember when you were growing up, even in your family spectrum, mom, dad, children, you know, that on any given day, you don't know how many conflicts there were going to be, how many arguments there were going to be, how many, you know, and it's the same thing. It's like learning how to come together. You know, you got two different personalities going on, and you got to come together, and these personalities have to mesh. And then, like you talked about, compromise, and then there's change, right? I remember when my husband and I first got married, he wasn't accustomed to being accountable, right? He just wasn't accustomed to, he wasn't accustomed to someone saying to him, "Where are you going? And what time will you be back?" Right? So that was an adjustment that he had to make, right? Because he just never, you know, had been independent, had his freedom, but I'm like, I'm your wife and I need to know where you are, and I need to know where you're going, when you're coming back, you know. And so that was an adjustment. We had to make an adjustment financially, right? Bringing those two financial worlds together. I mean, we're gonna be real today, right? We're gonna be real.
Yeah.
Like when we first got married, he literally had stuff I didn't know about. Now I know the new millennials, y'all don't do that no more, because y'all look at each other's credit reports and stuff.
Uh-oh. Well,
But there was stuff Chuck had, I had no idea. He was trying to do this thing without me knowing everything. You know what I'm saying? And so God had to take us through that process. You see what I'm saying? And so we had to learn. That's the work.
Yeah.
That's the work. You know, learning how to get it together. So when you come up to an obstacle, you figure it out.
Yeah.
Because we have made a covenant, and this is to death do us part. And we got to find what works and make it work.
Yeah. But I also think it over time, you know, one of the things I found after, you know, at by about 5-year benchmarks, you got to work to kind of reinvent your marriage. And I say that in a good way because, you know, we went through the children in elementary, middle school, high school, college, and then all of a sudden they were gone. And so now we're back to where we were 30 years ago as a couple, you know, and so you got to start dating again. That's work.
that's good.
You can't get lazy. You know, I remember just all the things when we were, you know, the work comes in those evolution and the little things at the beginning. I remember one of the biggest things was how many times a week we were going to have sex. Right now, when you're 24 as a man, you got a different idea. So, you know, I would get mad at that, but you know, I can't stay mad all the time. So that's where you got to work through those things. And who's going to cook, right? You know, who's going, like I said, I didn't like to come home, and I certainly didn't want anybody to ask me to come home. But you know, I had to work through that, man. That's where the work is, and I think it never stops. There's always something in the marriage that you're working on. That's just the nature of marriage.
That's good. Good. So the next question is, so we've talked about the challenges, some things that you have to overcome in marriage. What are your favorite things about being married? And what are your least favorite things about being married?
Well, I mean, one of my favorite things, is obviously my wife is an asset to our home. And so, you kind of see the things that you love best about marriage when you understand what your deficiencies are. So keeping stuff clean, cooking, all those type of things. But then also, I would probably say, even for the 5 years that we've been married, we've had a lot of spontaneity in being able to travel and being able to like you mentioned earlier, figuring out how you're going to continue to date in each season. We recently had a child last year in November, and so now we're going through that work of trying to figure out what does our marriage look like now
as parents
in the middle of a pandemic as parents, you know, and trying to figure out what that looks like. So I think though the great part about marriage is actually appreciating the work. um, and that it's not a burden. It's actually something I get to do, I get to figure out, and ultimately that advances the kingdom. So that's the spiritual answer. The other side of it is I love waking up to my wife every morning. So what about you?
I enjoy. I think we have fun,
Yep.
and we bring out the fun parts in each other. So like, I think we're both pretty goofy, silly, lighthearted. And the fun parts of marriage for me are those times when either one of us kind of need that laugh, or that time like we know we flow very well to be able to do that and have those fun things. And I think the fun parts too are the fact of that we don't have to do everything together. That makes it fun to me, that I know I can go off and I can enjoy the things that I like without having to worry, like, does my husband like this? Or because we can't do this together, it's not fun. So it's fun that we still have our separate things together. And I think the challenging things, or maybe least favorite thing about marriage, is I feel like the honest part, just the vulnerable part of marriage, that you are always having to work on something. You are never at a final place where there's no more work to do and we're good and everything's solid. There's always growth. There's always something that needs to be done. And so I think, those are the things they're challenging, because you always want to have the lighthearted, but we have to do the real stuff. And that's not always fun.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite thing is just being together. That's my love language, our love language. Like, we just love to be together, And so that's been my favorite thing, just having that ride or die, that person that's just right there, that's always been our love language, even now after 30 years, that I don't like when I'm not with him, even though I do have my girlfriend time and go out and have my fun. But my thing is, I love being with Chuck Williamson. Like, it's not a burden to me. It's a blessing to me when he's in my vicinity. I love it, and so I love the togetherness. I think the least fun is when you do have those challenges, and they do happen. I've told people so many times, times when you have disagreements, right? And then, you feel some kind of way, right? You feel some kind of way, it's like you love them, but you still in feeling some kind of way at that time. But the awesome thing about it is the makeup, when you bring it back together, God is able to, it's amazing how he just meshes those two hearts together, and you're able to overcome, because you're going to have some challenges and you have some obstacles. I know in my earlier years, I was a big crybaby. I cried about everything. And so I finally learned that wasn't helping. That was just something that was linked to my childhood, where I learned how to cry to get my way. You know what I'm saying? And so that's another part of the process of me learning, of me growing, of maturing. So he helped me to do that. So
First of all, I didn't make her cry a lot.
No,
okay?
she made me cry, y'all. I would cry. When I couldn't get my way, I would cry like a little girl. I had to get delivered from that little girl.
I would say the thing for me as a man, that my favorite thing about marriage is, one, we are friends, and so I've always valued, like I said earlier, a peaceful home. And one thing I can say is my wife has always made our home pleasant. So when you hear people say, the person is the fragrance of the house, well, she is. I mean, our sons know it. I used to enjoy coming home from work after a stressful day, because I knew there was going to be peace. And she's always created that. Even when I wasn't in the best mood or demonstrating peace or whatever, she was that one that really created that. I think the thing that I liked the least early on was that I had to really be mindful of my how I treated her and how it impacted her. Coming from a home where there's two boys, and my father was he wasn't aggressive, but he was stern with us. And so your no was no, and that was it. And so she came from a household where she was 7 years younger than her only brother. And so I had to learn how to kind of nurture some of that and compromise early. And that sometimes it was hard, but over time you kind of grow past that.
Okay. That's really interesting. And I think it may have been Elena. Sorry, I can't remember who said this specifically, but you said something about um, how you know that you can have your own time as well. So I know, Beth, you said you just love being with your husband like all the time. And I know, me and Elena, we know each other. We, just in case you guys don't know, me and Elena and James went to college together.
Yeah.
So I know Elena is an introvert in many ways. And so you said that sometimes it's good that you know that you can have that, you don't have to do everything together. Do you think that that's important, that I don't want to say independence, because I don't think you can be independent necessarily and be married. And you can speak on that as well. But how important is it to have that alone time while married? Whoever wants to speak on that.
Yeah, I said it. And I think it's one of those things for me that as we have been married, we've been friends for a very long time. And so our friendship, we do a lot of things together, enjoy each other. And now being married, I think one of the lessons that I've learned in being married is that, my husband is, he's so many things in a lot of ways, but he can't fit every single checkbox of all the things that I like to do. And so instead of always dragging him into some of the things that I know I enjoy, I feel comfortable in knowing that I can go and do certain things and he can go and enjoy certain things without me and without each other. And it kind of makes us better together when we do come together, because we're still able to enjoy ourselves and enjoy our things without feeling like the other is not as equally excited about something. He doesn't have to be as equally excited about cooking like I am. And I can go do that off by myself, or find, my friends who do like to enjoy those things. And then I come back in a more pleasant mood, and our household benefits from that time away from each other.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. What I was saying is that when I'm not with him, I yearn for him, but I do have my time without him.
Yeah.
Because really, even our relationship, my husband loves football. He loves every sport, actually. And I'm not that girl. So he is totally fine for me to be in a whole nother room and doing what I want to do while he watches his football. That's not something we've tried to merge. Okay. And so I'm in Mary Kay full time. I have my own business. So I travel. He travels at times without me. So yes, definitely. I think that's so key that you hold on to who you are as an individual.
That's
right?
good. Yeah.
As you continue on in that relationship. And if you have the right one, you'll be able to do that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's good. That's great. So the next question is, what things did you find out about yourself after marriage that you were surprised to discover?
I think I already told mine.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let James go on that one because
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I would probably, the biggest thing that surprised me is how much my grace has to be replenished on the daily basis, because even seeing that with my son, but it's like there's just certain things that before you were married may have affected you a little differently. But it's almost like in my case, once I got married, I felt like those things didn't matter as much. You start to realize or start analyzing the things that could kind of poke into your marriage, and you start saying, I could be mad about that, or I could, raise my voice about that, or we could get in an argument about that, but is that really worth it? And I think that's something that I've had to really analyze, because I process a lot to Elena. So I have to take a step back and sometimes realize that, like, my grace level has got to stay full, because if not, I'm not the best version of myself. So I think once you get married, your grace really gets tested, in terms of, and some people will say how quick your temper is, but just not always being on edge about things and trying to remain healthy in that space. So I think the level of grace that I've had has increased tremendously since I've been married.
wow.
Okay.
That's good.
Nice. Anyone
Yeah.
else want to touch on that?
I think,
ahead.
well, I was just saying how I had to grow up, I had to
Yeah.
mature.
Mm,
I did learn some things about that, things I had brought, probably from my childhood, and,
mm,
learning how to share and learning how it ain't all about you.
mhm.
Yeah.
That's true. I
So
think
good.
mine too was just that I feel like I'm a very selfless person when it comes to a lot of people, but that was something I realized in my marriage earlier on too. Like, oh, I'm kind of selfish. I was like, no, that's mine. I don't want me. He was like, what do you
Elena.
mean? I oh, okay. Like, and then also learning that, I think I speak up pretty well, but speaking up in my marriage about what I need, that's definitely something that I've had to learn since being married, that, speaking up about things that I need instead of just pouting in the corner and waiting for you to
Yeah.
like come see about me. But I'm like, no,
Wow.
let me actually speak up about what I need, what I want. And those definitely have been beneficial in actually working on that.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing, Shonté. I
Okay.
think for me, also another thing is just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should.
That's
It's
Yeah.
like
good.
there are
Yeah.
certain things that my wife, or certain temperaments and things that she just has as part of who she is, that are assets to our marriage, that I could totally take advantage of with probably no recourse, because that's just who she is. And I find myself a lot saying, okay, I could go out and spend this money, or I could just kind of do what I want in this situation. Or if I don't consider her in this, she probably won't get mad at me, because, and I know that her temperament is that way, but is that right?
Yeah.
And those are the analytical parts that I have to take a step back and say, because I tend to try to, if I know that she's not going to be mad about that, I'll probably try it.
Elena's
But
face.
I have to find myself saying, no, I can't take advantage of my wife in that way, because everything kind of has a consequence at some point, and I don't want that to blow up at some point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great. So the last question that was submitted is, as a single, how do I know I'm really ready for the lifetime commitment of marriage, other than just loving that person? So in other words, is love enough, or are there other aspects that need to be in conjunction with love?
Mm,
You got to be ready to be committed.
yeah.
Mhm.
Got to be ready to be committed. Love is important. And I'm going to be honest with you. I know some people say, I don't know, but my prayer from the day, from as long as I can remember from my marriage, is that I will forever remain in love with my husband. Like I wanted to have that feeling in my heart when he walked in the room. Like I wanted to keep that. And I think God is like, delight yourself in the Lord, he'll give you the desires of your
Yeah.
heart. And I believe I still have that today. I wanted that. I didn't want to be like going through the motions.
Mhm.
I wanted to be what I felt 30 years ago, even though it's changed, what I'm saying? Things have changed, but but I still love him and I still enjoy his company. I still look forward to seeing him. So I think love is important, but we have to be careful of infatuation, understanding the difference between infatuation and love,
Yeah.
and really learning that person to a degree. Do you have a love that covers the multitude of sin? Because
Yeah.
you got to have a love that covers the multitude of sin in any relationship,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and the things that you see that person doing that really gets on your nerves, can you deal with that for a lifetime?
Yeah.
So if you can't deal with it for a lifetime, you don't need to go there.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and I know with females, a lot of times I think we tend to compromise because we think, okay, I see this sin, but I'm gonna change him. I'm gonna change him.
Mhm.
No, you're not.
Mm-mm.
No,
Yeah.
you're not.
Yeah.
And so you need to be real about it, and understanding does he really have what you have to offer?
Yeah.
I mean, does he really have what you want? And so I just think love, yes, but commitment. You got to be ready to be committed.
Right. Right. I agree. You got to burn all your bridges. One of the things that we committed to early on was, not gonna, we're gonna be faithful to each other in all areas, right? We're not gonna get physical with each other, right? And we weren't going to leave and come back whenever we got upset with each other. And so one of the things that I've always come, I love my wife, and but sometimes love is a feeling, but I think my love is driven out of the covenant, like James said. It's out of my commitment to my wife, right, and to my family, and certainly I do love my wife, but I think one of the things that's important as a man is you got to burn all bridges behind you, right, and you got to go forth in your marriage with everything you have. um, and I believe you'll be successful. And it's when we kind of look back and look to the side, keep some of those old connections, that we're tested in marriage, and things look better on the outside than they really are. You know.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that when you say if love is enough, I actually think love is enough if people understand what love really is. Like
Mm.
to the Winston's point, when you start talking about infatuation, I think when you really analyze love, and that it's patient, it's kind, it's long suffering, and that even Christ died for us, and that was love, and nothing about that was pretty, nothing about that was enjoyable to what he did. I mean, all of that is applicable to marriage. It's like, if it's just the warm and fuzzies, nah, that's not going to be enough. But if you say, okay, no matter what comes, no matter what goes, I'm going to stay committed. I'm going to kind of die to myself daily, if you will. And I think that if you do that, then you're doing your part in the marriage. But then also you have to be aware of the things that will come to try to break you up. I mean, and being transparent about what those things are. Because as much as my wife may love me and she may be doing her part, if I'm not aware of, like you mentioned, the bridges or the kind of the things that I'm keeping under the rug that could come in and cause problems, then that could be a big deal. So I do think that awareness has to come in, and that transparency, and that if you do have an understanding of love, that it can work.
Yeah.
Yeah, those little imps, you gotta watch out for those little imps. They love to rear their head. But definitely, like, love is action. So it is not just that feeling of the warm and fuzzies, but at the end of the day, are you still gonna be here? Like you said, we're not gonna be in and out of this thing going back and forth. And then I like the point too that Chuck said, when you're talking about, are you ready for a relationship? Are you ready to be all in?
Yeah.
Are you ready to present all of yourself to the table? Or are you still gonna have something that you're like, no one's ever gonna know me in this way, no one's ever gonna know me in that way? Then are you really ready? If you still are wanting to hold something back or hold something to yourself. And also thinking too, is love enough? Or are you open to the fact that maybe the best version of you is not yet to be presented?
Yep.
That happen while you are in a relationship, and that if you're ready for a relationship, you're ready, then you're really essentially saying that there's more to come out of me than where I am right now.
That's good.
That's good. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have for y'all. Any last points? I think we have about a minute left.
I think one last thing I probably would say, in terms of marriage, I know we hear a lot of we hear the term submission a lot, and I think sometimes people don't understand what that means. And our pastor is really big on, submission comes into play when you can't agree, and so I think agreement is always the goal. And if you cannot agree, then that's when you start deferring, and that it's not just a man. I defer to her, she defers to me. Whoever is driving, I let them drive. And I think that's always going to happen throughout your marriage, every different season. So that's the one thing I would add.
Yeah.
And when you marry the right man, you don't have to be afraid of that word.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important too. James said that there's kind of a two-way submission. There's some things I submit to my wife too. She's a trained accountant, and so she's better with money and dollars than I am. So I submit to her on that side. And if she needs a final decision, then I give it. But like I said, I think it's a two-way street. It works on both sides, and I think that's important to remember. That if you love somebody, you're committed to them. It's not really going to be, you're not giving up anything. You are really working together to move whatever situation you're dealing with beyond where it needs to be, really.
And the one thing, to your point, that will be birthed out of figuring out how to submit is dealing with your own pride. And so I think that's something that comes up or will come up in a marriage is, am I scared to submit? Something I feel like if I give up, it emasculate me. And knowing that once I get over that, that we'll just flow. And so that's
good.
All right. So that's all. I think that's all of our time. So thank you so much, y'all. Everything was great. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. So thank you so much for stopping by.
Absolutely.
No problem.
Good to meet you guys.
Yeah,
good
same,
to meet you
same.
too. I want to talk about these childbearing years. Okay.
Yeah.
Y'all connect. Y'all connect.
This is a new level.
We'll get together and talk about that.
Oh, indeed.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.